Blessings. My name is Dr. Lisette Rojas Flores. I am a clinical psychologist with expertise in working with children and families, and also an associate professor in the School of Psychology at Fuller Theological Seminary. Welcome. I am so glad that you have been very intentional about learning how to accompany immigrants and migrants in their journey. And today we are going to begin to set a framework of how to understand the experience of the migrant and the immigrant in the United States. I want you to stop for a moment and think about the migrant, and as he or she is about to embark in this journey, and prepares himself or comes with this suitcase full of dreams, full of strengths, full of aspirations. That suitcase is also full of disappointments, vulnerabilities, not so great experiences that have prompted perhaps the reason why they chose to depart their own countries. So with that, let me just emphasize two things that I think are very important. One is, by the simple fact that a person is a migrant, they are in a situation of vulnerability. Because when you think of vulnerability, we're referring to that diminished capacity to protect oneself, their own human rights, particularly as we think of their journey and some of the different events that they experience along the way. And there are different factors that are associated with this vulnerability, and they could be individual factors, for instance, because they are from indigenous groups, because they are women, because of their mental health. There are also different familial factors, whether they're poor or not. There are other family dynamics. Communal factors when we start thinking about opportunities for employment and education and so forth, structural as well as situational problems. You can name it. It's very it's very important to understand that all of those factors are related to vulnerability. But I want to highlight the specific vulnerabilities of two particular groups that we are going to be encountering in our congregations all the time. And those are specific related to children and women. And I want you to, before we talked about them, I want you to visualize this journey, this migration journey. And you see it here in this graph that there are three main stages that will help us kind of visualize those vulnerabilities that I'm talking about, depending those threats and those challenges, depending on where they are. The pre-migration phase, or when they're about to depart, is often prompted by poverty, family separation, violence. We know quite a bit about violence from those migrants that are coming from Central America. And that phase leads to the migration phase, or the transit phase, in which various conditions or events happen during or after the journey that involve potential trauma, physical harm, accidents that the migrant encounters as they leave the country of origin to come to the destination country where they are aiming to go to. When we think about the post-migration, that is, once you arrive to the destination country, the problems do not stop. They do not get solved by magic. The land of the dreams does not solve the immigrant problems. In fact, it creates another host of problems that could include family conflict, discrimination by the mere fact that they are immigrants, And it could be because of their skin color. Some immigrants have darker skins than others. Some immigrants come from indigenous groups and so forth. The social isolation that is attached with the language differences, legal status, particularly if they have arrived to the host country with a precarious legal status, marginalizations, a whole host of other problems. Again, think about these stages and not just the threats and challenges associated with each stage, but also the psychosocial reactions that are evoked in a person along the way. Having said that, I do want to highlight that the psychosocial and the reactions, as well as the threats and challenges, are different for particular groups. And think about the triple vulnerability that two groups face. If you see in this graph here, just like I mentioned, the mere fact that you are an immigrant puts you in a situation of vulnerability. But if you add to that the fact that you're a woman or a child or an adolescent, that escalates the risk to 3 times fold, just by the fact of being a migrant, the fact of being a woman, and the fact of being a child, meaning that you're in a situation of power, unequal power, dependent on someone else, in particular with women coming from patriarchal societies. They are a higher risk for violence. Now, we know a lot of physical violence as well as sexual violence. Same thing goes for children who are coming in a company or are forcibly separated from their parents or guardians at the border. So those particular groups require much more attention, much more intentionality in the accompaniment that we offer to them, precisely because their risk and threats are 3 times fold of their any other migrant. Just to we just went through the journey, the migration journey, and I think if you put in there, I'm pretty sure some of you know quite a bit about the journey of unaccompanied minors. You could plug in their story, their journey in this visual that I gave you, the pre-migration, migration, and post-migration, and recognize that each state in which they're coming in, they're facing a host of risk and challenges and that are unique to that particular stage where in their migration journey. And that's extremely important for you to keep in mind when you're working with children, to keep in mind these stages and those threats that they might have experienced, especially if you try to accompany them in order to support their growth, their healing, and their flourishing. Be cognizant that every stage also comes in with a host of psychosocial reactions that are connected to these threats and these challenges. And we're going to see in the next lesson how these threats and challenges, if not dealt appropriately and if they're not supported through those situations, can generate or become turn into symptoms and problems that are associated with mental health problems that are serious and will need much more intervention.